My name is Chris Lorenz, a professor of biology at Thomas More College, and we want to welcome you to Year 3, Lecture 7 of the Marine Biology Lecture and Conservation Series at the Newport Aquarium. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to recognize Eric Rose in the back, the president of the Newport Aquarium, and Scott Wingate, the executive director of the Whitley Foundation, two organizations with whom we've been partnering for a number of years and have helped put this together for us. We'd like to acknowledge their support and their input to this series. I'd also like to acknowledge the Marine Biology Lecture Series committee. So if you stand up, Stephanie, Judy, Tony Roderick, Lom Pham from Thomas More College, and of course Dan Dunlap from the Whitley Foundation. And it's my pleasure and honor to introduce President David Armstrong, the president of Thomas More College, to introduce tonight's speaker.
Good evening, everyone. Very special night here as we continue our lecture series. It's been such a wonderful program, and the internationally renowned speakers that we've brought to this area. It's been so special, and so I can't thank Chris Lorenz and our faculty and our people at Thomas More enough for all the work that they've done. Thomas More College is going through a growth period in enrollment and in fundraising, and that's because of all the wonderful faculty, staff, and trustees that we have, and especially our students. So I'd just like to take a second and have our faculty and staff and students from Thomas More stand up. Come on, stand up. All our TMC people. Thanks so much for being here and supporting. You make it all happen. I also want to thank our board chair, Mark Neltner. Mark is over here somewhere. Please stand. Thanks, Mark. So we have a wonderful speaker here tonight, Dr. Rachel Graham. Fascinated with the sea from early days growing up in Tunisia, Rachel Graham was drawn in the fields of research, environment, and development in Latin America, Africa, and Micronesia. For the past 30 years, she has worked with both the private sector and institutions such as the United Nations, the University of York, the Smithsonian Institution, and the Wildlife Conservation Society. For over 2 decades, Rachel has lived in Belize and worked with fisheries and partners in several countries to identify threats, research needs, and conservation opportunities for threatened marine wildlife and their critical habitats. As part of this work, Rachel has catalyzed a range of megafauna research and conservation action worldwide and is an active member of the IUCN Shark Specialist Group and helped to found several national shark advisory committees to better facilitate information sharing as well as management and policy reform for elasmobranchs, which I found out are sharks and rays. I didn't know what that was. God bless you. In 2011, she won the Whitley Fund for the Nature Gold Award for her work with sharks and communities. In 2014, Rachel founded the international NGO MarAlliance to promote impactful and inclusive grassroots science and conservation of marine wildlife. Rachel holds a Bachelor of Science in Zoology from Oxford, a Master's of Science from Edinburgh, and a PhD from the University of York, UK. But and I love this part of her bio, she is most proud of her 2 sons, 9 and 14, who balance their love of fishing with their desire to be marine scientists and conservationists. So before we welcome Rachel, we're going to have Dan come up and give a few words. And I think you're going to give something away, right, Dan?
Possibly. All right, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming here. This is truly an incredible program, and hopefully everyone is going to leave inspired tonight because I got a feeling this is going to be a great presentation, not to put any pressure on you. So, just curious, how many of you in this audience have been to all 7 lecture series? Raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. Thank you. And as President Armstrong thanked everybody from Thomas More College, I also wanted to give a shout out to all of the WAVE staff and volunteers that help make the logistics of this lecture series work, such as yesterday and today. So if all WAVE staff and volunteers here today can stand up and get a round of applause. Come on, let's see everybody. There we go. Fantastic. And as we do with every lecture series, we give away a little prize because we love people that sign up early for our lecture series. So the winner of a VIP shark feeding experience for 4, which will take place with one of our wonderful Newport Aquarium biologists, the winner of this experience is Ruby Ford. Oh. Ruby, please come on out and accept. She's on her way? Okay. All right. Well, we will make sure to get that to Ruby. But without further ado, again, thank you for coming tonight. This is going to be an incredible presentation tonight. President Armstrong already read off the incredible resume. So, Dr. Graham, please come on up here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me all in the back?
Yes.
Yes? Brilliant. Okay. I was told I have to project my voice and speak directly into the microphone. I'm doing that. I'm good at taking instructions. I also want to thank everybody. I have had the warmest welcome. I've been here for 2 days. I got here at 12:30 midnight on Sunday, and it's been just this incredible whirlwind of activities, and I've met so many amazing people. I have been to the Highlands, the high school, to give a presentation. I got to meet students who are in marine biology from the Thomas More College and all the staff at the Wave Foundation, the aquarium, and I have received the warmest welcome, and so for that I'm really, really grateful. And something that the staff don't know here, but I just found out because I decided, I'm going to check out Ancestry.com. I did that 23andMe genetics test thing. Right, so then I thought, I'll look at Ancestry.com, and guess what? I have a great-grandfather who was born in Kentucky. And my grandmother was born in Tennessee, right? I've just got a funny accent. I bought it at Costco. But what I'm thrilled about is that you all seem to have some interest about sharks, because you're all here tonight to listen a little bit more about sharks, and let us not forget about those flat sharks, the rays, who we love very, very much. And so I'd really like to kind of move over onto our topic of the talk today, turning fear into wonder. And I want to talk a little bit about diversity, form, behavior, but I decided I wanted to transition a little bit and include a lot on conservation. Because I think a lot of folks don't necessarily realize what is going on the front lines in many of the countries, tropical countries, where you have the greatest diversity of sharks and some of the greatest threats as well. Do I point over there?
I'm not sure. Oh. I'm going to click it.
Okay. Okay. So you think, why an elephant? Well, it's the elephant in the room that we must address. Fear. Most often, when I hear people talk about sharks, airport, in a bus, and I overhear them talking about sharks, they're afraid of them. Or they're kind of excited, but they're still afraid. So a question for you all, I'd like to know how many people, and be very, very honest, how many people are truly afraid of sharks? Please raise your hand. Truly, let's be honest. Okay, that's excellent. That's a really low percentage, and we'll work with you. But that is a really low percentage because we've been doing a lot of public surveys for perception. What we're finding is that due to a lot of the outreach that you're seeing on things like Discovery Channel and National Geographic, that fear is declining. And that tends to be with inland populations, it tends to be with people who have access to TVs and those kinds of documentaries. And you've got about, in Belize, we did a public perception survey, and we surveyed about 400 people, and 50% of them were really scared of sharks. However, what was interesting is that none of them wanted to see sharks dead. So what you're seeing is a major change in how people actually view sharks, and they realize that sharks are better, worth a lot more alive than dead. And we'll be talking a little bit about that during this talk. Of course, one of the things that does not help the shark's case is Jaws. And do you know that Peter Benchley, who wrote this book, spent the rest of his life, and unfortunately he did die a few years ago, but he spent the rest of his life trying to make up for it. He made the Peter Benchley Awards, he gave a lot of money to shark conservation, etc., because as a result of Jaws, there was kind of a free-for-all in killing sharks. And the more recent I still cannot bring myself to see this one. I just can't. I can't. But I'm told that it's beyond ludicrous. And I'm showing you some coconuts. Why am I showing you coconuts? Because one of the statistics that people bandy about is that you are more likely to die from a falling coconut than you are from being bitten by a shark. So just to set the record straight, first of all, you've got about 10 fatal shark incidents a year. 10 globally. I can't substantiate the coconuts. I've been online, I have done research, I've put volunteers onto trying to compile the statistics. We cannot, for the life of us, we found out a lot about kind of coconut injuries in India, coconut injuries, especially in Goa. Apparently they have a lot of coconuts. But we cannot find that related statistic for sharks. Why am I showing Bambi? Because everybody cares for Bambi, but what you don't realize is that Bambi kills 130 people a year in the United States. I don't like Bambi for that reason. Also, they're a big transmitter of Lyme disease. So I say, no more Odocoilus virginianus, the white-tailed deer. Sorry, Bambi, you're out. But it's true. So when people say, oh, but the sharks, say, but Bambi. And how can you not love that face? How can you not love that face? And that is one of the wonderful things about being able to present here. You have an incredible attraction with Rhinoptera bonasus, this friendly-faced cow-nosed radius. And they're incredibly well distributed throughout the Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, Atlantic, and such. Beautiful animal. I would hope you get to know it better. But all to say that, how can you not love a ray?
Rachel, maybe a little louder.
A little louder? Ha. Can you hear me better? Okay, wonderful. This is even better because now I can freely. Okay. So, just finishing up on the topic of fear, it's a very different thing for us to say if we are not afraid or afraid of sharks than it is for fishermen, especially small-scale fishermen. Because this is a wonderful rendition by Homer of shark fishing.
I've been clicking,
Oh, there we
so
go. You
just
will-
keep
you
pointing
can-
at me.
okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
I'm going to have these gestures and songs. Maybe I can lift my leg. And really I've talked to a lot of traditional fishers whom I work with, and this is kind of like the worst nightmare. It really is. And I've been in a situation where our boat had overturned at night. We were in an area where we had a lot of sharks that we had caught. I was with traditional fishers, and they were climbing on the boats while I was dangling my legs in the water. And so I know that it's a real and present fear for them. For example, for my good friend Chingy, AKA Coco Plum, AKA Lennox Leslie. In Belize, everybody has at least 3 names. My dear friend Alex Scarbutt, who lost an arm due to a fall from a mango tree, they call him Claw, because he has 1 short arm and 1 long arm. So they're not always very nice with the names that they give. Chingy would kill any shark that would cotton on to one of his snappers. This is in Belize. Thank you. Hilmar Salazar, who is a traditional fisher for lobster and conch, had run into God knows how many bull sharks and hammerheads, and he was really deathly afraid of sharks until he started working with us. Zé Luis Montero in Cape Verde, also one of our key members of the team, terrified of sharks but fished them assiduously. His whole family fished sharks. And we'll talk a little bit about how some of that and those attitudes have changed a little bit. But there is a lot of reverence for sharks, and I could talk about some of the lore on sharks throughout the world, but one of the amazing things I came across recently was from my own backyard. I've been 20 years in Belize, and we have the Mayan civilization. And in the Mayan civilization, sharks were revered. And this was actually one of the glyphs for sharks. And lo and behold, I do not know why, but the lead or the head Mayan would actually have shark jaws right over his groin. I think that's a little dangerous myself. And you know what I was really excited about is I found out that the top lady in the Mayan world, like the #1 first lady in the Mayan culture, was named Lady Sharkfin. What a great name. So they are very much revered in our part of the world. So a lot of people ask me, but what about your relationship with sharks, Rachel? Where did that start? Are you afraid? Well, I have some trepidation, especially when I've got a 14-foot tiger in front of me, or maybe a bull comes out really close to check me out. But I'm going to fast track it to when I lived in Guatemala, working for the UN, dying to get back into the field. I'd already worked as a dive master. I'd worked in the Red Sea, I'd worked in the Marine, and there I was in an office in the UN working on forestry projects and agricultural projects and enjoying it, but really, really missing the sea. I said, you know what, I think it's time to do what is called to me. Life is never linear, and you really have to do what makes you happy. So I jumped the border when I found out that there was a project starting over in Belize to look at fish. I thought I was going to be working with fish, and I thought I was going to be working with fishers. And that's what I discovered. So it was quite the discovery, and my life took a dogleg in a completely different direction. And just to introduce you to one of my favorite all-time whale sharks, the largest fish in the sea. They grow to be over 60 feet, over 100 years old. They don't reach sexual maturity until 20 or 30 years old. Can you imagine having to wait until you're 20 for your first date? Not much fun. But Facey there, those are my 2 assistants. He tucked his snout into their stomach and wouldn't go away until he finally got tired of them and came over to me. The only way I could get away from him was climbing on top of his head at 70 feet depth with the camera equipment. And you know what? He would just sit there like this. Well, there she is. And he did this 3 times, and then I was running out of air and I had to go to the surface. But that was really kind of my introduction to whale sharks, and I thought it was a very racy first date. But then I fell in love with them and decided to find out as much as I could about them, because when I went back to the mainland and did as much research on them, I found out that there was hardly anything known about them. That there were only maybe 3 or 4 sites where they were seen predictably in the world. There were only 4 people working on whale sharks at that time. This was in 97, 98. And I thought, my calling. I was supposed to go off to Africa and help somebody with lions, but I think this is way better. Again, life is never linear. And just so you know why those whale sharks were there, those fish that I'd mentioned I was supposed to be working with, actually, they come together at a particular time and place, close to the full moon period, and this is what a fish bank looks like. These are large Kubera snappers, Eugenia cyanopterus, each one about this big. And they're reproducing, so they're releasing milk and sperm in the water column, milk and eggs in the water column, and these fertilized eggs go to the surface, and then they hatch out about 18 to 20 hours later, and the small fry end up with the currents for a little while, and then finally recruit back close to the reef. So this is what we were supposed to study, but of course, what I was keen to study was the biggest fish of them all. I do wear glasses after all, so I need to be able to see what it is that I'm studying. I'm sorry, Chris, but mussels is not my calling. Or not my calling. So this is just giving you an idea of how one actually tags a whale shark, because I get asked this a lot. And it's usually in water. I use tagging poles. A lot of people, there were only 4 other people working with them at that time, but they were trying to tag them with spear guns. You don't need spear guns. You can use something very simple, a big elastic and a pole, a dart, and you can affix a tag to them. And this gives you an idea of one of the types of tags that I would affix. This is what we call a satellite tag. Who here is familiar with satellite tagging technology? Okay, a few. Okay, so basically these tags have these, they have these computer boards inside that are able to, in some cases, archive data like depth and temperature, even light levels, which will give you a crude location. And of course, every time they come up to the surface, they'll transmit their location. So basically, the whale shark will kind of, here I am, ping, here I am, ping. And you can start to build up a track of these animals over time. Now, sadly, these don't last very long on a whale shark because they tend to get munched by other things, but they do give us some real insights into their movement behavior. Oh, and this is just a nice, calm, tranquil video. It was a young female in West Africa. It was one of the first whale sharks I'd actually tagged in West Africa. It was in 2016. You can see the tag floating behind her. And I mentioned to you the fisherman, say Luis Montero, who's deathly afraid of sharks. He's actually swimming along with the whale shark, and his mind is blown. I have a no-touch policy, so he's kind of getting close, but I think he's potentially more afraid of my rebuke than the shark. So, after having put on over 50 tags and looking at some of the patterns of movement that whale sharks were giving us and answering some of the key questions that a lot of people had in this area, including fishermen that I was working with, which is, are they always here all the time? Are they moving to other areas? Well, we could definitely say these whale sharks that we're tagging at the site where the snappers were spawning, right over here, are moving all over the Caribbean, into the Gulf of Mexico, even Bahamas, and back and forth from Mexico over to Cuba. And that was a real revelation because there was little known about movements of whale sharks in this entire region. And this kind of opened up a whole new avenue for tourism as well. So some of the reasons that I was doing a lot of the work was also to ensure that A, we could get these animals protected, we could get their feeding site protected, and that we could try and promote sustainable tourism. This was absolutely critical. You don't just need to use tags, because tags are, to a certain degree, invasive. They're small darts that actually will sit under the skin into the thick skin, and they have to have about 15 centimeter thick skin, sometimes down to the musculature. But you can also get a lot of information on whale sharks from their pattern of spots. And you can, if they are resighted, see that they move from A to B to C, but it takes people being in the water all the time. And what the satellite tags will do is that they'll give you the information whether there's a person around or not. And so working with a really amazing team of scientists, Jason Holmberg, Brad Norman, and Zaven Arzumanian, who is a NASA astronomist, that's right. They had put together this algorithm that was able to determine from the pattern of spots on the side of a whale shark whether you were seeing the same whale shark again and again by being able to match photos. And I would urge you, if anybody has ever swum with a whale shark or plans on swimming with whale shark, anybody here? I see a plan, I see hands up, fantastic. Please take side photos on the left or the right hand side, and just go to whaleshark.org and upload them, and you will help with the global science on whale sharks. This is really critical because we've just come out with 2 papers in just the last few months that have been really eye-opening with all of the citizen science that's been produced. The paper last, I'm going to focus on our region. So the paper that we put out, led by Jennifer McKinney, and no small feat. This woman has a baby and she's produced a top paper at the same time. We tell you it's not an easy feat for a woman scientist to publish on a regular basis. These are all of the sightings that were made of whale sharks, and as you can see, they're actually focused on kind of key sites in the Caribbean, Mexico, Bahamas, flower garden banks up in the Texas-Louisiana border area. And what we were finding is a lot of movement, very similar to the movement that I recorded with satellite tags, and highlighting this triangle right here. And very importantly, highlighting this area right near Cancun, which receives over 4 million tourists a year. So what's going on right here? So one of the things from that, sorry, I'm skipping ahead of myself. This is just to show you that even though we've got thousands and thousands of people putting in sightings, this is a discovery curve for whale sharks over from 1998, where I actually put in some of the first images ever of whale shark IDs, all the way up to 2016. And as you can see, it hasn't quite leveled off yet. So I think we've still got quite a few animals to find, but the bulk of them were actually recorded between 2004 and about 2010, as whale shark tourism burgeoned in that area. So, do you see those dots? Each of these dots is a whale shark. And that's essentially what was happening at that particular site. You can go back. Oh, yeah. Just going to go back. Yeah, so that's exactly what was happening at that site. We had this incredible aggregation of whale sharks that colleagues of mine found to number up to 420 whale sharks in a go. Where I was working in Belize with the fishermen, we at maximum found 25 to 30 whale sharks. So this was, an order of magnitude greater. And in fact, ever since, it's been deemed the largest whale shark aggregation in the world. Move forward. And what we found is that they're there feeding very, very actively during the months of June, July, August, and early September. So if you want to go, that's a really good time to go. And I just want to pause for 1 minute. When people say they're afraid of sharks and they see this, they do get a little bit worried about the whale sharks, and I do want to share a little story with you. It might make you think twice about swimming with them, but don't let it put you off. I was in that same position as Ricky, a friend of mine, when the whale shark that was hungry, eating zooplankton and fish eggs, comes up behind me, unbeknownst to me, and the next thing I know, my leg is in its mouth. These whale sharks over here are anywhere from 6 to about 8 meters long. Their mouths are 4 feet wide. And I have to say, I felt like Raggedy Andy because he kind of tossed me back and forth a little while, and I thought, oh no, what if he dives? What if he dives down deep? Because from the satellite tagging that I did, I know that they can dive down to over 6,000 feet. I can't dive. My diving abilities are not that good. But you know, funny enough, I don't taste like zooplankton. I obviously don't have a fishy egg taste. And so he released me, and I had the most perfect little crisscross scar from his tiny little teeth. And all my friends were extremely jealous, and they kept on putting their legs in the way of whale sharks after that. So, and what were they feeding on in such abundance for that period of time? Well, it's actually some friends of mine, Eric Hoffmeyer and others, who determined that after doing these massive plankton tows with plankton nets, these are eggs. These are tuna eggs. So you must have massive, or what friends of mine call industrial quantities of tuna that are spawning in this area and producing, and that's just part of a 1 minute tow. In fact, you come out of it and your bra is filled with eggs, you're finding eggs in your hair and in other places that are apparently it's really good for the skin and all the rest, so I'm just going to go with that. And what I love about science and the work that we're doing is you think you're going for one thing, it's like a dendritic tree. You think you're going for this, and then all of a sudden you go, oh wow, squirrel. And you do that, and again, it's another squirrel. And I wouldn't say that you could approximate manta rays to squirrels, and I don't know why that map didn't come up quite as it should, but I had the great fortune to work with mantas that were utilizing the same site as the whale sharks. And it's well worth noting that that corner of the Yucatan Peninsula is also, oh, I'm sorry about that map, because I was going to show you those red lines right here, are major shipping lines. No, it just doesn't want to do it. Okay. Technology. So these are all whale shark fins, and this is a huge cargo boat. So you can tell that we have some major threats. There have been pictures of whale sharks wrapped around the bows of these big boats. And imagine, again, their low productivity, they reach sexual maturity late, and they live a long time, so they can't replace themselves very easily. But this was only to show, this particular site, was that manta rays also utilize the site, and they're really picky foragers. They know exactly where the food lies and the current lines, and you can see them following those current lines very specifically, and they're incredibly inconsiderate. I have to have a talk with the manta rays because they are not staying within the boundaries of marine protected areas. And that is one of our major conservation tools in our toolkit in marine conservation, are marine protected areas. So what do you do when those animals don't stay within marine protected area boundaries? Well, that's a problem. And in this particular case in Mexico, we've been talking a lot about expanding the size of the marine protected area to encompass some of the key feeding areas for both manta rays and whale sharks. So that's still in progress. And I just want to say there are a few mysteries. Actually, that is it. There are a few little mysteries that remain. That is a neonate whale shark. It's like a tadpole. They're born live at about 38 centimeters, really tiny. And that is one of the big mysteries that remains. You're finding one here, one in the Indian Ocean, one in the mangroves in Papua New Guinea, one in Venezuela, but you're not finding large numbers. Yet whale sharks are the most prolific of the shark and ray species, in that it produces up to 300 pups at a time. That's what small sharks are called. And you know what? What's really sad is all of our reproductive information from whale sharks comes from only one female that was caught in Taiwan in 1996. So we've got a lot of work to do to better understand kind of reproductive differences between females, and also where these neonates are being pupped, where they're growing up and recruiting and such. One thing to note, though, that whale sharks have this canny ability. They can store sperm. So they can actually, the females can store sperm for over 2 years. And that makes so much sense, because so many of these aggregation sites where we're now finding whale sharks, we're now over 20 hotspots in the world, they're mainly juvenile male, and sometimes large mature males, but where are the females? And so there are very few places in the world where you can predictably see large females. And the Darwin Island, or Darwin Arch in the Galapagos, is one of them. And there are a couple of other sites where we see large females, but they tend to be interspersed amongst the males. So yet another mystery to solve.
It's not going.
Oh no! I was joking that I'm probably going to have to mine my slideshow because it's got so many different videos and slides in it. Oh no, it's unhappy. So what I'll do is, I won't mind yet. When I see you flagging and kind of falling onto the seat in front of you, then I'll start my Marcel Marceau impression. But what I will say is that after ensuring that whale sharks were protected in Belize, I helped a lot of other researchers in other countries get their research going. We also got a marine protected area declared around those spawning fish sites in Belize. Got whale sharks protected in Central America, throughout Central America. So a lot of different aspects were actually a lot of conservation wins. It was then that I kind of started talking to all the fishers I was working with out at this spawning aggregation site. I said, you know, I'm not seeing a lot of other sharks. Occasionally some bull sharks, occasionally some silkies, gorgeous sharks. Oh, that's a gratuitous picture of my youngest child. I had to throw it in a second. That's Gabe. He went out with his dad and they actually found one of the tags that had come off of the whale sharks. I said, sometimes they last about a few days to several months and give us the tracking data of that period of time. He is now 9, so he's not looking quite as childlike anymore, but I will always think of him as that small, cute. So as I was mentioning, I'm talking to all these fishers, and they're saying, yeah, you know what? The situation is not great with the other sharks. So indeed, as of today, I just got the update. Where's Dan? Where's Dan? I got the update from the top ichthyologist, or top elasmobranch specialist, Dave Ebert. He's a taxonomist of note, and he told me that we are now at 1,282 species of sharks, rays, skinks, and chimeras as of this morning. So you've got the latest and the skinny, and that paper hasn't even been published yet, so you're ahead of everybody. And the point of this slide is, indeed, we now know quite a lot about whale sharks. We also know a lot about great whites, we know a lot about tigers and bulls, etc. But what about the 1,200 and I guess 75 other species of lesser known sharks and rays? What's going on with them? And that's when I thought I was going on this line of whale sharks forever, and I went, squirrel. And this is really what shocked me. A dear friend, Dr. Shirley Clark, who's based out in Japan, part of the time, Pohnpei, wrote key seminal papers talking about the world trade in sharks, and especially shark fins, because that was a major driver of shark fishing. And she established that in 2002, that up to 73 million sharks were being taken from the oceans every year. That is definitely not sustainable, considering some of the life history aspects of sharks and rays, where they have that late maturity, that long life, and usually very low productivity. In the case of the manta rays that you saw before, it can be only a full year gestation with one pup, and in some cases they might have a reproductive pause for 2 to 5 years before they have another pup. So when you think of these animals in terms of a fishery, you might be able to have a boutique fishery for it to be sustainable, but you can't treat them in the same way that you do finfish. So this was shocking to me. And the majority of the large take of sharks are from some of these large industrial trawler, longliners, purse seiner, netters, like this Chinese ship that we came across in Pohnpei that had actually grounded on the reef. It scraped itself off the reef, and then it went off to go longline somewhere in the Federated States of Micronesia's exclusive economic zone. We don't think it had permits, but there was nobody there to enforce. But the folks I work with, and where I see a huge amount of take, are in the coastal nearshore fisheries, small-scale fisheries throughout developing countries, a lot of tropical countries. In fact, 50% of all shark and ray species occur in the coastal areas. So that's where you get the most diversity, and that's where you obviously have a huge overlap with human pressure and human populations. And most of the fishers are working out of 23 to 27 or 28 foot boats, and the gear of choice are gill nets. This is an iconic image by Brian Scarry, who's an amazing National Geographic photographer. We're really, really pleased. He's joining us as one of our ambassadors from MarAlliance. And I couldn't have captured it better. That's a thresher shark, Alopius superciliosus, I believe, because it has a big eye. And this is what we're seeing. We're seeing a huge take, unsustainable take of sharks through the use of nets. A lot of these sharks are brought to nearshore areas, very, very spread out. Usually there's no central locations, especially in Central America. And why is that? Because those small boats can't go very far, so they have to come back with their sharks very quickly, and they have to process the sharks quickly, because as they say, they pee through their skin. If you don't process the shark meat immediately, then it's unusable, because it has very high levels of urea. It tastes absolutely awful. So they have to be close to an area where they can process them. And this is usually, this is so hard for us to see because we work with all of these species, and I'll be perfectly frank, these were a lot of sharks in an area that has several marine protected areas. And we saw from pictures that other people took, we were not there to take these pictures. These were given to us anonymously. We posted them on social media, and we created an outcry in the public in Belize who wants to see things change for sharks in Belize. We saw several of our tagged sharks in amongst the piles of sharks. And the site where they're doing this is Lighthouse Reef Atoll, which is the furthest most site in Belize and offers the second longest barrier reef in the world. And basically we found that huge dips in the abundance of sharks when we went monitoring last year after this take, because it's not just that pile. We found out from some of the fishers who were so upset about this that they had taken over 1,000 sharks from this one pile. And they're very sight faithful sharks, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Go ahead. So there is a take for shark fins, but we're starting to see a decline in the use and the desire for shark fin. And I know that there's many moves afoot to actually instigate fin bans. And I think anything that can help sharks is great. But what is our end goal? Our end goal really is to stop taking sharks from the sea. So fin bans will help kind of lessen the demand for fins, but it may not actually help stop fishing sharks out of the sea. Next one. And the reason for that is because there's a huge demand for meat. So this has been one of the key drivers in our region, in Central America in particular, but also in Cape Verde and a couple of other countries where we work. And what we're finding is that people are willing to consume this meat even though it's very high in methylmercury. And we've done some of those tests, and we're doing more testing on it to see whether we can actually sway people's attitudes towards sharks and reduce their consumption because they know that they're ingesting so much methylmercury and it's a very harmful neurotoxin. What I found in some of the surveys that I've done with the public is that men don't care, but women do. So that's great. I'm glad we did the survey because now we're going to orient a lot of our outreach towards women, young women, pregnant women, and also everybody who prepares food, and see if we can reduce consumption and demand that way. This is just to show you how it's spread out. This is in Guatemala. Everything's put on this concrete. It's actually absolutely awful. I've seen cats and rats just scurrying and scampering, peeing on everything, flies all over the place. And so we're pulling all this together, and we show people, and they go, "Oh my God, this is what I'm eating? Cat pee? Not very nice." Next. And as the sharks are declining in numbers, as you're getting more pressure from shark fishers, they're actually turning to species that they never used to fish. Or if they fish, they catch them as byproduct in their nets, they would chop them up and use them for the shark fishery instead. And now they're not doing that anymore. They're actually even using the ray. And you're even seeing that sometimes in markets in Asia, they're trying to fob off ray as a higher value shark. And rays may even have more vulnerable life histories than sharks. Why am I showing this picture? So that is one of the unbelievable displays that you can see in Antigua, Guatemala. They do a huge to-do about the Easter week. Catholicism is huge throughout most of the Americas, actually. But in order to do right by the church, people want to eat fish in the Lenten season. They want to make sure that they're adhering to their beliefs. And what is the cheapest fish out there? Shark. So what we're finding is that religion, and Catholicism in particular, actually is having a big impact on shark populations. So one of the things that we would like to do is we would like to actually go and talk to the church and say, hey, how can we possibly come to an understanding so that we can continue to have sharks and people can continue to have anything that is not red meat, preferably fish. And this is just an additional picture to let you know that shark curios also fuel a demand for shark products. And who here has joint problems? Or are they creaking as much as I'm creaking? That's actually my knees. So people take chondroitin pills, glucosamine, chondroitin, etc. A lot of those are actually made with shark products. So when you're thinking about things like a fin ban, etc. Think bigger. I know that potentially there's a thought of doing that here in Kentucky. Think banning shark products in general. No shark meat, no conjointed, no shark curios. And I didn't mean to be the Debbie Downer and tell you all about kind of deaths of sharks and the global fisheries, but it has got us into a state now where over close to a quarter of all sharks and rays in the world are threatened with extinction. And this is determined by the IUCN Red List, Shark Specialist Group, this bunch of us experts around the world who sit down with all the numbers and we make these determinations. And this is a poster child for the shark and ray populations. This is a large tooth sawfish, which was abundant throughout the world in coastal areas, riverine areas, estuarine, and now you can only find it more predictably in Australia. And I'm searching everywhere for it. We have some clues, we have some hints, but it's pretty much regionally extinct, or at least ecologically extinct in Central America. Who's seen this on Facebook? This is the most dangerous animal in the world. It is responsible for millions of deaths every year, and by its side, a great white shark swims peacefully. I love this because it's all about trying to change those attitudes and make people realize that people are really far more dangerous than sharks. And within all of this context, with declining numbers, with dire situations with large coastal fisheries for sharks, we still don't know how many we have. So if we want to reverse these declines, we need to have some really solid numbers. And a lot of the time, we can't get them from the fisheries, because a lot of the fishers don't want to share those information, this data with us. Or because they're so spread out in different areas, it's really difficult for us to do the data gathering that we need to do. And to give you an idea, the scalloped hammerhead, we have no clue. This is a circumglobal species. We have no clue what the numbers are around the world. By comparison, lions in Africa, we know we've got about 20,000 lions. We are absolutely spot on with those numbers. And this becomes even more important when we consider that some of the shark species that we're looking at that we thought we knew, that whose life longevities we thought we knew, actually we really didn't know at all. And some recent papers have come out that have shown that sharks are much older than we thought, and this one is a poster child for old sharks. How old do you think this Greenland shark gets? It's a Greenland shark.
100 years.
100? We got 100 in the back. 300 in the back.
500.
500, you are very close, sir. You've won the Greenland shark. Don't eat it because you'll probably die. They do prepare it actually in Greenland, but they have to ferment it and all the rest. It's apparently quite nasty. But yes, they actually took the lens in the eye, right here, which in many cases they're blind. They have a parasite that live in their eye, and they did gall radiocarbon dating. So kind of looking at the degradation of the stable isotopes for carbon that were generated after the last bomb blasts in the, was it 1954 or so. And from that, they were able to determine that this large female, well, not this one, but the dead one, unfortunately, they have to die for that. They are caught in the fishery, was 392 years, plus or minus 120 years. So these sharks are now the longest living vertebrate on the globe. And this one has to wait 150 years for its first day. Yeah. Sorry. So the question is, how do we reverse declines? And this is where I want to go into a little bit of some of the work that we're doing and kind of some of the approaches that we're taking, because you have high-level approaches, you've got policy approaches, you've got a lot of research, and we integrate some of that into it. But what I found is one of the most sustainable ways of trying to elicit change is working at the grassroots level, working with communities, those who depend most on the resources. So, and just to show you kind of our approach, as it was mentioned, I created an organization called MarAlliance about almost 4 years ago, and we thought we would just mainly do conservation science. We would mainly do research. And then what we realized is nobody's picking up the baton for a whole host of different aspects here to try and restore the select populations of target species and sharks and rays. We can't do everything. We don't have enough money. So we have to pick and choose. So we focused on reef-associated sharks and rays. Call it a lifestyle decision. Because I like reefs, and I like the tropics, and I don't like the cold. Although I have to tell you, I really enjoy diving in the shark tank here. It was fantastic. I had a great time. So we do the research because you need to know what you have. We also, where we can, do fisheries assessments and work with fishers on their landings and measure the dead animals. We look at the human health implications with methylmercury and see whether we can leverage that into change. What we have found, though, outreach and education are absolutely critical. So we've really redoubled our efforts in that particular area, and we're working more and more with managers and decision makers so that we can actually mitigate the threats. If nets are one of the biggest threats in coastal fisheries, not just the sharks, but a whole host of other fisheries, then that's probably one of the things we need to focus on, and that is indeed what we're focusing on. And then support the policymakers by giving them the information and making the recommendations of what is necessary. And not just in Belize, but places like Panama, Cape Verde, Honduras, Micronesia, Cuba, and such. And just so you know, we're not single-mindedly focused on sharks, because what works for sharks most of the time, with their particular set of threats with nets and long lines and coastal fisheries, will also work for rays, large grouper, like the Goliath grouper. That's the second largest grouper in the world, and I could talk for hours about Goliath grouper because I've done a lot of work with them, but I won't. But I did get to swim with his larger cousin, Epinephelus lanceolatus, the big grouper in the tank, and I was smitten. Everybody else wanted to ask me about the black-tip sharks and all the rest, but I was smitten by the grouper. Anyway, on with the next one, turtles. And people have told me, it's a good thing you include turtles, you know, Rachel, because they're the gateway animal. A lot of people don't like sharks and rays, but they like turtles. So if you have turtles, that's great. And you can get them to care for your sharks and rays. And just a little aside, just so you know, I have a very special relationship with loggerheads. They don't like me. I have no idea why. They usually gun for me, they target me, they like to climb on top of me, they like to try and bite me. So it was with great trepidation today that I got into the shark and ray tank with, what's his name, Denver?
Denver, yes.
Denver, yes. I was a little worried about Denver, to tell you the truth. Everything else, I was like, this is great, but Denver gave me the willies. And Denver, in the end, it was really funny, because he would do kind of side things like, you know, I can get you now. And he'd just do these little swoops in front of me. Naughty, naughty little turtle. Okay.
Go backwards now.
That's
We're
exciting.
gonna try forward. There we go.
There we go. So what we've done is we want to, so our goal is to reverse these declines, restore populations in certain areas. We want to work locally. We want to engage as many people as possible, and we want to make it easy, low cost, highly replicable, statistically robust, so that this is really good, strong science. We came up with a suite of 3 methods, and our proof of concept in Belize went fantastically, and so now we've spread to Mexico and Honduras and Cuba and Panama. hopefully next Nicaragua, Costa Rica. We're also doing this in Cape Verde, Federated States of Micronesia, and so forth. And the best part of it is it uses materials like PVC and a GoPro. Your own legs. We all now have thighs of thunder. Or thunder thighs? No, that's it. Thunder thighs. Thighs of steel in MarAlliance because we swim hundreds of kilometers every year. And then the best bit is all the fishers get to catch the sharks. And they tag them and then they release them. So we do scientific long lining, and that's an example of that. So I'm going to go through the 3 methods, some of the results that we've gotten, and move on. This is just to give you an idea of where we started in Belize, and then we decided we wanted a proof of concept for working in a region. Why? Because these inconsiderate little critters keep moving past national borders. And they'll zip up and down all over the place, so we have to look big, we have to look regionally. And so working with the governments in Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, and fishers, tour guides, and other stakeholders for sharks, rays, and other large marine animals, we set up all these permanent sites here, and each one of these yellow dots might have, for example, Lighthouse Reef here, might have 48 stations. So we have to swim at least 48 kilometers in that particular site. And then you've got the Swan Islands over here. And the first thing that we do is, as I mentioned, with the PVC and the GoPro, we do the underwater equivalent of camera trapping. Here we are, putting it down underwater, bait arm with a standard amount of bait, a standard type of bait, because we found that bait is a big variable in how many animals will actually come to the installation. We use rocks, cable ties, a little GoPro covered by zinc so it doesn't get munched by something. And then one of our fisher team takes it down, positions it down. These guys are amazing. Some of these guys can free dive to well over 100 feet. This is in Cape Verde. That's a beautiful, large subadult. You see, he's doing what Denver did to me today. Okay, so we're going to stop there. I have to tell you, he actually took the entire bait arm and made off with it and munched the bait cage. As you would if you're a tiger that's measuring 2.75 meters. So what kind of results can we get in this kind of glommed together results? So your average frequency of observation over here on your y-axis, and then the different countries, Mexico, Belize, and Honduras, where we did a lot of our work in that region. These are some of the key sites where we did our BRUV, or our underwater camera trapping, show that we've got quite a lot of sharks at this one site here in Mexico called Banco Chinchorro. This is an offshore atoll that almost nobody but traditional fishers go to. And this really made me go squirrel. That's my next site. That's where I really want to do a lot of work. And I was actually very concerned about the low numbers here in Belize. It's worth actually taking out of our mix and our analysis the nurse sharks. We have a nurse shark here in the aquarium. They're ubiquitous. Nurse sharks are all over the Caribbean, and they rip off bait arms. They're actually quite a pain. And for us to get a real feel for the toothy sharks, the carcharinids, like the bull sharks and the hammerheads and the Caribbean reef sharks, we need to take them out of the mix. And when we do, again, we see that the majority of sharks that were analyzed or that were observed in Banco Chinchorro in Mexico are leading us to want to work there. And this is a national park, but the sharks are not protected. You can actually fish them. So that's next on our list. And to give you another idea of the type of results that we can get, we thought that this whole protected set of islands in Honduras, we just had an earthquake here, 7.8 on the Richter scale. We had the tsunami warning and everything about 10 days ago. It lies on a major fault. This is a Kenyan Trench right here. And we thought we had well-distributed sharks and rays throughout the islands. Most of the tourism is down here that would have a protective effect on sharks and rays. And what we found actually is they're all up to the east of the islands where hardly anybody goes. So this reinforces the aspect that we know about sharks and rays. They don't like people, generally speaking. They just want to be left alone. And that's where the majority of our abundance for sharks and rays are. And then finally, secondly, our underwater visual census, where we get to swim kilometer upon kilometer. There's Exxon from Honduras taking data. These little yellow dots show all the areas where we've actually swum kilometer upon kilometer. We weren't able to do up here because the visibility is not good enough. And up here, the visibility and the boat traffic are so bad here that you'll probably get diced up by somebody's propeller before you even make it through a kilometer. And remember I said sea turtles are the gateway animal, and what we found is if we've only got so much money to work on sea turtles, where are we going to put that money? Where should we really focus our efforts? And that would be right here in Roatan, Honduras. And when we're out there, we also have the opportunity to pick up nets that are left. As I said, our free divers are incredible. They can dive to over 100 feet. We'll really try to control the scourge that is the invasive lionfish. It's been terrible. If you have the opportunity to eat lionfish, please do what you can. They're fantastic. They make a great ceviche, a great fillet, and I think Whole Foods is selling them now. And I've seen some great behavior with the nurse sharks. If they see you spearing one, they will act like puppy dogs, and they will go and look for the lionfish with you. And in fact, now what we're finding on the reefs in Belize is the nurse sharks will actually bump you and show you where the lionfish are. And then they'll just sit there and go. And they'll keep doing that. They're literally, I call them the Labradors of the sea. So I'm going to go over the last method, and then I'm going to go a little bit faster because I know that I've taken a lot of your time. Scientific longlining. So everybody's probably heard of boat search, the big boats to do the scientific longlining. This is what I would love to be able to work off of all the time. This is what we got to work off of this summer in Cape Verde with the Prince Albert of Monaco. But usually that's not the case. We're usually working out of that small boat you see here. And these small boats right here. So we set a big line with 50 hooks on them. When we catch an animal, we bring them to boat side, we measure them, tag them with something like a cow tag, and then release them. And we try to do this as quickly as possible, and we leave the animals in the water. It keeps them happy, and they're oxygenated, and we've had amazing survival that way. So this is the famous video that I don't think works.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm going to try it.
Okay,
It wasn't
don't.
working.
Let's move on.
I don't want to crash your PowerPoint.
No, there we go. So one of the sites where we've done a lot of our scientific longlining and caught and tagged, and I've done surgery on sharks, is the Lighthouse Reef Atoll. And I'm just showing you this particular picture because when I put acoustic transmitters inside them that ping off at a certain time and can be received by underwater ears or receivers, we're starting to understand what the sharks are able to, what their patterns of residency or movement are around this entire atoll. And what we found was that certain sites where we have receivers, and we have receivers all over the atoll, certain sites are absolutely dominated by big females. That's a big female. So these circles show you the size of the animal, big female, and very small kind of subadult females or males in orange. Next. And why is this important? Because what we found is sharks are like us. They have networks. They have preferences. They say, I prefer hanging out with this person and not that person, or that shark and that shark. And these are all receivers, and what you're seeing is kind of how much time they spent in different receivers and how much relatedness they have with other sharks that are also using that receiver. Throughout all of this work, we've put out over 75,000 hooks in Belize. We haven't found a single sawfish. So we're thinking at this point, sawfish, again, are ecologically extinct, at least in Belize. We are making some deep water shark discoveries that are phenomenal. This is a gulper shark, Centrophorus granulosus. We think we might even have some new species. And we're getting them 10 minutes from our office door. We just go out to the reef, drop a line down to 1,500 feet, and Bob's your uncle. And with hammerheads, just a couple of other cool pieces of information that we've got with hammerheads. We measure them in the same way. And these are all the points where we've sampled for hammerheads with long lines. We've caught only 5 hammerheads. That's how few hammerheads there are these days. And so in the very few captures that we've had, we were able to put on a triaxial accelerometer, which is like what you have in your phone. So your phone knows when you're moving around. The same thing on the fin of a hammerhead. And this is how we determined that hammerheads are doing some really funky swimming things. We couldn't understand the data until colleagues in Australia had the same funky data. We started really looking at it, and then we realized also, wait a second, people are saying, we're seeing these hammerheads swimming on their sides. It doesn't make any sense. So we looked at that. We looked at the data again, and sure enough, the tags were not off. They were functioning perfectly. What we found is hammerheads, because they have such a huge dorsal fin, which is very much wanted by the Chinese fins markets, gets more lift if it swims on its side and uses its dorsal fin like a pectoral. It can save 10% of its swimming energy. And we published this in Nature just over a year ago. And what we started seeing is that we're starting to see a lot more energy-saving type of swimming behavior in other species as a consequence of now having discovered that. And that just shows you a video that's been placed in the Bahamas on the great hammerhead, and they spend 90% of their time at a 50 to 70% angle. And it's exhausting work. So I'm going to go through changing attitudes really quickly because I want to wrap up. Absolutely critical work that we've been doing with education and outreach, just like the aquarium here. It's been absolutely fantastic to see all that they've done to reach diverse audiences here, and the same thing in our Central American region. One of the big messages we have is sharks are worth a lot more alive than dead. Just the local tourism that we have right near where we work is worth $4.5 million US just in receipts from trips alone a year. And this is what we're trying to work against, because there's still a lot of machoism associated with catching large sharks. We've created mascots. They've been incredibly, incredibly popular. I've never known that so many kids wanted hugs. Hilmar is showing some of the high school students in one of the southern towns how ray jaws work. First ever use of microscopes. A lot of school presentations, a lot on the theory. That's in Cape Verde, that's in Honduras. We produce a lot of really good informative and educational posters. And sometimes we take the classroom outside. It's much better, you can learn more that way. That's in Cape Verde. And we also like to monitor change, because people go, how do you know if you've changed? Somebody's perception or knowledge. And so we use emoticons and we use stars. Because a lot of people, a lot of the kids don't necessarily read or write very well. And these are just all the opportunities that we have to reach some of the public in different communities where we work. Always bringing in a lot of girls, because we really believe in STEM, and then finally getting them out to sea. And this is called the Menino do Mar, which is the Kids of the Sea in Cape Verde. That's in Belize. I believe wholeheartedly in throwing kids into the water with sharks. So it's been a huge program. It's called Kids Meet Sharks. They're terrified at first, so I do the first leap, and then after that they see I'm not eaten. So they come in gingerly, and then the horrible thing is we can never get them out of the water. And really giving them that opportunity to reconnect with nature. And throughout that whole aspect, we're also pushing a lot of how to take data, how to ask scientific questions, how to answer them, how to conduct science, because scientific training in a lot of Central American countries and Cape Verde is unfortunately quite poor. So we really, really believe that our approach, that multi-pronged approach, coupled with building capacities at the grassroots level, really helps create the champions that we need. And they're the ones who are going to care most for these animals. And they create these peer-to-peer networks that work really well. They're stuck in boats for 8 hours at a time. Oh, I see we have some children here in the audience. So everybody's very proud of their phone, and one of the biggest tragedies for any of the fishermen is when their phone gets wet. And I have to say, one of the best tricks I learned in 2017 was from Santiago in Roatan, who never got his phone wet, and I asked him how he managed that, and he says, "Bon." So there you go. If you need to keep your phone dry, use a condom. And finally, you want to push this all back up to policy to make those legislative changes that are going to make a difference. So we've really helped create a lot of these national shark advisory groups that bring together fishermen and government stakeholders and port authorities and fisheries departments and such. And they've been very successful. And we've managed to pass some legislation just because of the creation of national shark advisory groups that are then able to disseminate a lot of the research and work that we do back to their own groups. And of course, always take them to the sea. Take policymakers to the sea is the best way to talk to them. And I just want to mention the tourism sector, because they're absolutely huge. Shark tourism is worth millions and millions of dollars annually in many countries, 130 million annually in Bahamas. And I would say, if you're going to go and conduct shark tourism or go on a shark or ray tour somewhere, please don't touch them. So that's a big no-no. Definitely don't do that. Don't ride a whale shark. Yes, somebody really did that. And that's a really respectful way to actually enjoy animals in the wild. So, a few more slides to wrap. I think the thing to take away, even if you're inland, you can have a big impact on sharks and rays. You can make a huge difference. First of all, don't buy shark and ray products. So if you can, avoid the chondroitin, glucosamine, the meat, fins, etc. And even reduce your consumption of seafood, because they have to eat something too. So if you reduce your seafood consumption, then they also have something to eat. And our use of plastics has gone out of control. So whatever you can control in terms of single-use plastics, the sea will thank you, because whatever you use here will eventually make it out to the sea. Do, please, go and swim with sharks and rays in the wild. There are many awesome operators. It shows local communities that you really value these animals, puts money back into the communities. And if you want, donate or volunteer time with a shark conservation organization. I like to say, do something every day that makes you a little scared. And remember how I talked about the three guys at the start? Chingy, aka Coco Plum Lennox, Zay Montero. Chingy just caught, for the first time in his life, this species. It's related to your shark rays in the aquarium, and he didn't kill it. He immediately called me, and he said, I want to do something for the sharks and the rays. I want to help you bring them back. And he might not work with us all the time, but now his daughter is working with us. I started working, I knew her when she was 9, she's now 30, she's had 4 children, she's done with the baby making, she wants to help sharks and rays. Hilmar. This was right after a huge bull shark dive. He used to be terrified of bull sharks. That was 5 minutes after he'd swum with them. He's changed forever. He's now one of our key allies. And Zay is putting on a transmitter on a tiger shark. He used to kill them. Now he's a key part of our research in Cape Verde, West Africa. He's helping run some of the educational meetings for the Benin de Mar. He'll even put on one of the mascots. And the kids were like, hey, we know it's you, Zay, we can tell from your feet. And there he is with the president of Cape Verde, representing fishermen, Fishermen's Cooperative, and MarAlliance. We're really, really proud of his work. So I just want to say we wouldn't be able to do it without the incredible people that I've mentioned. These are some of our people in MarAlliance spread across several countries worldwide. And if you should ever think you'd like to support our work in any way, please know that it can go towards education, research, tags, peer-to-peer learning, and more. And with that, I know I've taken a lot of your time, but thank you very much. Straw. I forgot to say biomedical straw because they're absolutely fabulous. I have them in my family. No more plastic straws. Brilliant.
And we just happen to be selling them in the back room. All right, let's take 10 minutes or so, and any questions that you have for Dr. Graham, she'd be more than happy to answer. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand, and I will come over so you can speak into the microphone.
There's one in the back.
I can project if necessary.
Go ahead and project.
Question. One of the arguments of killing sharks is that they're competing with food fishes that humans want. When they do take out the sharks, do you see a raise in the food fishes of desired species that we want, or undesired species take off? So can we counter that argument with it's not working?
So that's a good question, whether taking out the shark. Did everybody hear that? Yes, okay. So we'll repeat it. There are so many stresses on all trophic levels right now, on all fish levels, that it's really difficult to discern if you take out the sharks what kind of predator release you might have. So when you take out the sharks, you've released the predator from the other populations of fish, and you would expect them to then increase in abundance. We're not necessarily seeing that because fishing pressure is just so hard on all levels, except for maybe the herbivores. And you might see in some cases an increase, but you can't necessarily correlate it with the fishery for sharks and their prey.
Thank you.
I've stunned you into silence. Oh my goodness. Yes, there's a couple of.
There's one over here. Oh.
I'm not a good projector. Can you hear me?
I can hear you great. Anybody else here?
Excellent. So you've done an amazing job of this grassroots movement. What was your biggest challenge in mobilizing local communities, being an outsider?
I think you're right, it is a challenge, and sometimes not being born in the country is very difficult. Another reason why I train others locally and have them then speak. So that's one of the ways. Yeah, I think that's probably the most important way. And then they take ownership over it, and I'm there to facilitate, enable.
I just want to ask specifically about recently at Cocos Island, there was a tiger shark attack, excuse me.
Incident.
Thank you for correcting me, I appreciate that. And what's a way that you think we can effectively continue to communicate with other divers and people that really are passionate? Divers, ecologists, conservationists that are passionate, but also see things like that happen. It's an area I think that gets very little attention, but the reality is that the people that are closest to this need to be at the front line of conservation and ecology. So how do we help them connect with the fact that something tragic like this happens, yet it's still something very important that we continue to protect a ecological gem like Cocos Island?
That's a tough one, and that really came out of the left field for a lot of people in Cocos. I know a host of folks who work there. I will just refer to a study that Dr. Chris Neff did in Australia after quite a few shark incidents there. And people recognized that they were not happy with what happened, but they didn't want to see any lethal measures used against the sharks as a result. And I think what you're seeing increasingly in people is that it will happen. You can do everything you can to avoid it, but occasionally it will happen, because when you go into the sea, you're going into the blue Serengeti, you're going into the wilderness. And I would like to be able to say we'll have 0 incidents, but that's just not possible. And I know that the dive master was with the lady, and that he did his best to fight off the tiger shark, etc. That it was a young male that had not been seen that much there, I think. So was not really used to people. You can't control for those factors. And as you have more divers in the world who want to get in and see these large animals, you're potentially going to have incidents. I wish I could be more positive of what we might be able to do to reduce them, but people
I'm
want to
not
see
looking
them.
for reduction, more how do we continue to promote the idea of conservation and encourage people to get in the water, even when things like that are
I
faced? There's
don't
no
think-
easy answer.
Yeah, I don't think there's any easy answer, and I don't think it really dampened spirits. I think a lot of people got right back in the water there, because it was such an unusual and rare incident. We know that they happen. So I have to say, I don't think it's dampened anybody's spirits to go diving there. Yes.
Thank you very much. Is this on?
Yes.
Oh, there it is. Okay. So I do a lot of research myself. One of the things I think is important to understand and maybe clarify, what are the consequences if all the sharks, the great sharks that we're talking about today, were to disappear from the environment? And then not only the consequences to humans, but also the consequences to the environment itself.
So that's a very helpful point. Sometimes I kind of run over it and don't touch it. But sharks are tremendously important to the ecosystem in the same way that we use a lot of the time the terrestrial analogy of the wolves and the deer. So you remove the wolves, the deer proliferate, the forests change as a result because of their grazing patterns changing, and that can increase erosion and so on and so forth. With sharks, there are very few pristine places that you can actually look at in the world where you can determine whether a shark removal has had major impact on a particular ecosystem. But the Line Islands in the Pacific is one of them. It's one that I'd like to talk about because what you are seeing is not just a reduction in a host of other species, but you're also seeing great changes in the coral cover and the coral health. And so in a lot of countries where I work, we're seeing very degraded coral ecosystems. We're seeing a lot of macroalgae. Not enough herbivores can take care of it. So again, it goes back to the question from the gentleman earlier, which is it's difficult to tease apart all of these effects. But we do know that if we remove all of the sharks, just like we removed all the wolves, we're probably going to have some pretty disastrous consequences. And we might not be able to directly tie those disastrous consequences like the declines of our reef, but we know that they're part and parcel of that decline.
thank you. Since you just touched on it, I've been going down to the Grill, Jamaica for about the last 10 years, and they're very worried about their reef out there. It seems like...
What reef?
I'm sorry?
What reef?
I don't know, they just keep mentioning the reef, and you can see it from the beach, and they're losing. It seems like every year we go down there, it's like the beach is closer and closer and closer to the hotel. I mean, it's like the depth of the water going out is 8-9 feet for 100 yards, but 25 years ago, that was all beach.
Yes.
So the correlation of the reef, of all the conservation, I was wondering how that overlaps with what, you're conserving the living species, and the reef itself is live, and it's decaying, and the people are kind of worried about it down there.
So it's interesting, because I was actually in Negril about 20 years ago, and I was shocked by the state of the reef, and that was 20 years ago, and the lack of fish. I saw one tank, that was it, one small herbivorous fish in a whole week of being there. I'm seeing the same things that you've seen in Negril, which is the loss of beaches, the erosion, etc. And I think it's a real combination of warmer seawater, expansion of that seawater, greater erosion of waves, because there are fewer protective reefs. We're seeing the degradation of our reefs, which means that more in Belize, for example, we've lost a ton of coastal area. And I think it's a combination of all those factors. So we've got rising sea levels coupled with degradation of the reef and more wave action that's able to come to shore and erode those beaches. And it's a worry for us because all the coastal economies are so dependent. Exactly.
It's almost like the Norman Malley boat.
Yes, and so it is a big worry. I think we're going to be seeing some very, very large-scale changes in the next 25 years for a lot of coastal areas. And we're particularly at risk, at least in Jamaica. They've got a lot of big mountains close by. That's not necessarily the case in the coastal plains in Belize and a lot of other countries. So yes, I am worried, and I think, yeah, we don't touch on it, we don't work on that. We try to work on these animals, but it does impact us nonetheless.
All right, final question here.
Hi.
Hello again.
Hello again. Is there a way that these species can be sustainably fished and not only protected as a tourism resource, but as a food resource as well?
So that's a good question, because we have been talking a lot about the sustainability of shark fisheries, and there are some species that are really rapidly reproducing. For example, in our region, we've got the Caribbean shark-nosed shark. It's like the rabbit of the sharks. It reaches sexual maturity at about 2 years. It can pop those pups out. But I think shark fisheries are always going to be more of a boutique fishery than they are this large-scale industrial type of fishing. And in fact, we need to look beyond the industrial fishing. We can't really afford that anymore. It's just, we have superseded our ability to sustain fisheries, as you know. So there are some fisheries in Australia, some fisheries also in the States that are considered to be well managed. Some people will be on the side of, yes, spiny dogfish are well managed, others disagree. But all the countries where you're seeing good management of fisheries are developed with strong enforcement, with a very robust judicial system and legislation. But the majority of diversity and abundance for these animals tend to be in other countries, Panama, Mexico, India, and such, and Indonesia. And therein lies the problem, where unfortunately we haven't made much progress in terms of sustainable fisheries.
All right, well, Dr. Graham, thank you again. And on behalf of Thomas More College and the Wade Foundation, we do have a couple of things for you. Number one, first and foremost, you got to meet some penguins yesterday. And so we have a custom-made penguin painting from Blueberry and Speckles for you. So you can take that down to MarAlliance as well. And we really do appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come up here. So again, on behalf of Thomas More College and the Wade Foundation, we'd like to have a donation to the MarAlliance there. And thank you again for coming up and talking to everybody tonight. It was fantastic. So thank you.